Hi, welcome to Human Sexuality with me, your professor, Cynthia Anderson Sanchez. Today we're going to discuss disorders of sexual development. There is a wide variability that we see during sexual development. We learned last time about how the formation of your sex organs in the womb are dependent upon a multitude of variable factors, including the presence or absence of genes, transcription factors, proteins, hormones, etc. The concentrations of these different hormones varies greatly, and the outcome of these variations also vary greatly. In addition, the body must be able to recognize the presence of these particular hormones. So let's think about it. Because there are so many stages of sexual development in human life, there are a lot of opportunities for a person to develop along a continuous path that is not quite the average for a boy or a girl. When a less common path of sexual development is taken, the condition is often called disorder of sexual development, or DSD. So the name DSD is a name given to a lot of different variations of sexual development. The first disorder I'm going to discuss with you today is 5-alpha reductase deficiency, or more simply put, 5-ARD. 5-ARD is an autosomal recessive intersex condition that is caused by a mutation of the 5-alpha reductase type 2 gene. In the huge, complex cascade of events leading to sexual development, even small alterations can have a big impact. In 5-ARD, there is a genetic mutation that causes the enzyme 5-alpha reductase enzyme to lack the ability to convert testosterone to the biologically active DHT. The original names for this rare disorder were created by the communities in which the condition was found to be fairly common. One of the names was guavadoses, which the literal translation for guavadoses is penis at 12. Machahembres is the literal translation for first woman, then a man. And in another community, it was called Turnums, which is a literal translation to expected to become men. In this condition, you could say that males are born female. As you may have guessed, individuals with this disorder are born female, or at least female-like. They are born with all of the female secondary sexual characteristics, including female genitalia. They are born without any male characteristics or any visible physical indication that they are genetically male. So imagine being born with 5-ARD. You're genetically male, but nobody knows it. You look female, and society will treat you a certain way based on that appearance and that assumption. So you're dressed up in dresses and bows. You might be encouraged to play with dolls or help with housework. You might be discouraged from roughhousing or playing outside with friends and being kind of rowdy. You would be maybe expected to prefer playing house or being indoors to outdoor sports. Just some examples. Individuals with 5-ARD are usually raised as female, but they usually end up having they usually have a male gender identity. This means that they usually feel more comfortable in male roles and participating in male behaviors and traits, as is defined by the particular society in which they live. So let's look at what happens in puberty with children that have 5-ARD. At the onset of puberty, males with 5-ARD that are raised as female might be waiting for the onset of their first periods or first menstruation. That never comes. In 5-ARD, the body responds to the onset of puberty with the following symptoms. The testes are actually going to descend from inside the body and drop outside of the body. They're going to turn inside out, literally, and they will descend from the internal pubic region and exit the body during puberty. Also, what looks to be the clitoris in the genital area of 5-ARD people, that clitoris will enlarge to form something that looks more like a penis. And then you'll have the formation of a scrotum as well that probably was not there before or was very underdeveloped and perhaps unrecognizable. Also, body and facial hair become evident, and you'll notice a deepening of the voice. So let's look a little bit more about what it is biologically speaking. So 5-alpha reductase deficiency is a genetic disorder, and it's very rare in the general population. However, we see that it is very prevalent in a couple of regions. It's prevalent in an isolated village in the southwestern region of the Dominican Republic and in the eastern highlands of Papua New Guinea. The really interesting thing about this phenomenon is we see that in 5-ARD, our cultural and societal views of male and female really get challenged. These individuals that are 5-ARD are genetically male, meaning they have an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. Their Y chromosome has a functional intact SRY gene, and the hormonal cascade triggered by the expression of that SRY gene are all normal and functional. For example, the Mullerian duct is successfully inhibited from developing the internal female reproductive structures, just as in non-5-ARD people. And the Wolffian duct is successfully activated to develop internal male genitalia. We see, though, that the outer regions of the genitals are not triggered to masculinize. And the reason is because testosterone is unable to be converted to the DHT form that is needed for that external male genitalia formation. The consequence of not being able to produce DHT is that these people are born with internal male sex organs, including testicles and Wolffian structures. So the testes lie inside of the body instead of being distended, as would be seen in a non-5-ARD male. Another thing that can happen is they can have ambiguous genitalia, which includes a macroclitoris or a micropenis, and we see a couple of examples of what that can look like here. Also, you might have instances where the urethra might be attached to the phallus. So when we talk about this, it's interesting how the cultural awareness of sexes in the communities in which this disorder is common really started to change their views of male versus female and the dichotomy of that there are two sexes. So it was during the 1970s that the 5-ARD births were first reported and accounted for as many as 2% of all births in these small villages of the Dominican Republic. Since then, doctors in the villages in both the Dominican Republic and the Papua New Guinea populations have become experts in distinguishing normal external female genitalia from ambiguous genitalia in 5-ARD babies. So due to the prevalence of these births, both cultures now believe in 3 sexual categories: the male, the female, and the pseudohermaphrodite. In Papua New Guinea, the children are viewed as flawed that have 5-ARD, and the children here are rejected and humiliated by their families as well as society, unfortunately. Whereas in the Dominican Republic, you see a very different societal view. The birth of the pseudohermaphrodite is fully accepted, and during puberty, the child's physical transformation into a male is marked by a joyous celebration. And I think that is wonderful. We could really use to follow that example. Another disorder I'd like to talk about today is congenital adrenal hyperplasia, or CAH. This is the term used for several different genetic conditions that can alter the production of mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, or sex steroids. Most of these conditions involve excessive or deficient production of sex steroids and can alter development of primary or secondary sexual characteristics. It can affect infants, children, or adults. So it can affect it at any stage of life. The symptoms of CAH vary depending on the form of CAH and the sex of the patient themselves. The symptoms of this disorder can include, depending on what we're talking about, let's first talk about the symptoms that are due to the inadequate production of the mineralocorticoids. Include vomiting due to salt wasting, which can actually lead to dehydration and even death. The symptoms that we see in these patients due to the excess androgens that their bodies are exposed to include that they may have a functional penis of average size, but without sperm production. They might have ambiguous genitalia. They could have early onset of pubic hair or onset of puberty at a very young age, or failure to be able to undergo puberty at all. You might see excessive facial hair, the absence of a menstrual cycle, infertility, and a lot of clitoromegaly may also be a side effect of this condition. Precocious puberty is a condition in which the onset of puberty occurs at an age much earlier than is normal. For example, there have been documented cases of precocious puberty in children as young as 5 years old. Precocious puberty results in the development of pubic hair, breasts, and genitalia. There are several disorders that can lead to precocious puberty. For this reason, precocious puberty is broken down into two distinct groups based upon its cause. One of them is central precocious puberty, which means that it is traced to a disorder in the hypothalamus or the pituitary gland, which are in the brain. Or peripheral precocious puberty, and in these cases, the cause is due to abnormalities that are outside of the central nervous system, for example, the gonads. This is a great example. This is a 6-year-old male with precocious puberty. We can see a lot of the maturation of the masculine features here in this young 6-year-old. The causes of central precocious puberty can include infections such as tuberculosis, head traumas, brain tumors, cysts, and a dozen or more genetic mutations. Other symptoms can also include short stature, early onset fertility, so they can become parents at an extremely young age, and advancement in bone age. Next, we'll look at the symptoms that are caused by the abnormal production of the sex steroids in the peripheral precocious puberty. The sources for the sex steroids may be either endogenous or exogenous. The endogenous sources include gonadal tumors, adrenal tumors, germ cell tumors, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, or McCune-Albright syndrome. Exogenous hormone sources could be hormones that the person is exposed to in the general environment, or perhaps they're having hormonal treatment for some other condition. Symptoms of peripheral precocious puberty include hypotension or low blood pressure, electrolyte abnormalities, ambiguous genitalia in females, ultramasculinized genitalia in females, high levels of androgens, and low levels of cortisol. This is a picture of what is believed to be the youngest mother ever recorded, Lena Medina in 1939. Lena Medina is the youngest known female to have given birth. In 1939, Lena Medina from Peru gave birth when she was only 5 years old. She delivered a 5.8-pound baby boy by cesarean section. The pregnancy was only discovered when the family sought medical attention for what they believed to be a growing abdominal tumor. Upon examination, Lena was found to be 7 months pregnant. Unfortunately, the father remains unknown despite police investigations at the time. There is also heterosexual precocious puberty, which is very interesting. In these cases, the early onset of puberty still happens at a very early age, but in this case, we see that the development is into a person of the opposite sex. For example, we'll see a male develop breasts and other feminine characteristics, or a female can develop body and facial hair and experience a deepened voice. Next, I'm going to talk about Klinefelter syndrome. Klinefelter syndrome, in these cases, these are XXY, so they have an additional chromosome here, which is the cause of Klinefelter syndrome. They are usually sterile, they might have weaker muscles and poor coordination. They can show smaller genitals, breast growth, and decreased body hair. So you see that it's basically a male that has been feminized by having the extra X chromosome. We see a karyotype here that shows the extra X chromosome. It's actually fairly common. It's the most common chromosomal disorder, and it occurs in as many as 1 to 500. It occurs in as many as 1 in 500 to 1 in 1,000 live male births. Some of the symptoms of Klinefelter syndrome include they might have a lower IQ, they might have a taller stature, poor muscle tone, gynecomastia, which is the formation of male breasts. They could also have small testes, and they're usually infertile. They might have long legs and wide hips, and less body hair. Next, I'm going to talk about Turner syndrome. What occurs in Turner syndrome is they are lacking a chromosome. So in their sex chromosome, instead of being XX or XY, they only have one X chromosome. The signs and symptoms vary among those that are affected, but some of the common traits include webbed neck, low set ears, low hairline at the back of the neck, short stature, amenorrhea, underdeveloped breast, and sterility. Turner syndrome occurs in as many as 1 in 2,000 births up to about 1 in 5,000 females at birth. All regions of the world and cultures are affected about equally. Generally, people with Turner syndrome have a shorter life expectancy, which is usually due to heart problems and diabetes. Next, I'm going to discuss briefly Fragile X syndrome. In Fragile X syndrome, there is a genetic mutation in the X chromosome that leads to physical symptoms which include an elongated face, large or protruding ears, flat feet, larger testes, and perhaps low muscle tone. Fragile X syndrome affects the different sexes differently. In females, since females have two X chromosomes, the effects of the mutated X chromosome will be partially masked by the presence of the healthy, unaffected, unmutated X chromosome. So this makes the symptoms of Fragile X syndrome less severe. In males, however, since males only have one X chromosome, the symptoms are more severe. Next, we'll talk about intersex individuals. Intersex is a general term used for a variety of conditions in which a person is born with a reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't seem to quite fit the typical definitions of male or female. For example, a person might be born appearing to be female on the outside, but having mostly male typical anatomy on the inside. Or a person may be born with genitals that seem to be in between or a hybrid of the two sexes. For example, a girl might be born with a noticeably large clitoris or lacking a vaginal opening, or a boy may be born with a notably smaller penis or a scrotum that is divided so that it looks more like labia. Also, a person might be born with a mosaic of genetics, so they could have some cells which are XX and other cells that are XY. So what does this mean? Intersex is a socially constructed category that reflects real biological variation. To better explain this, we can liken the sex spectrum to the color spectrum of the rainbow. There's no question that in nature there are different wavelengths that translate into colors most of us see: red, blue, orange, yellow. Biology and nature has shown us that sex is a spectrum as well. We see that nature presents us with sex anatomy spectrums. We see a wide variety of various shapes, sizes, and morphologies in all of our sex organs and sexual characteristics. So nature doesn't decide where the category of male ends and the category of intersex begins, or where the category of intersex ends and the category of female begins. That's not how it works. Humans today, typically doctors, are the ones that decide how small a penis has to be or how unusual a combination of parts has to be before it counts as intersex. Humans decide whether a person with XXY chromosomes or XY chromosomes and androgen insensity syndrome will count as intersex. You can see here there's a huge variety of phenotypical differences of how the genitalia can form and how you can have a continuation between male and female and really anything in between, or even the absence of either. For androgen insensitivity syndrome, it's a condition that results in the partial or complete inability of the cell to respond to androgens. This prevents a genetically male individual from developing outward male sexual characteristics. Instead, AIS males will develop female genitals and breasts, though they will not menstruate and they are going to be infertile as well. AIS is a condition that results in the partial or complete inability of the cell to respond to androgens. The unresponsiveness of the cell to the presence of androgenic hormones can impair or prevent the masculinization of male genitalia in the developing fetus, as well as the development of male secondary sexual characteristics at puberty. But this does not significantly impair female genitalia or sexual development.